Now what I did was I tried again to sort of explore this comparison a bit, and I found this quite interesting picture, which is quite a nice picture, showing the lunar module, lunar recursion module. It's tested in orbit. I think this is the Apollo 8 mission, I can't remember. But there again, it's a NASA image, you know, I've put all the links in. And what I did was, I reduced this image, because that's, you know, it's obviously not a top view, it's not quite a top view, but you can see it's fairly close to a top view. I haven't got quite a plan view, but it's fairly close. So I reduced this down to a 25 by 25 image like that, and then I re-enlarged it just so you can see what it looks like in a pixelated form. So there's actually only 25 by 25 pixels. So, you know, you can see a little bit of detail, you can see a bit of colour variation. You know, there's a few, it's not all black and white. We've got sort of browny bit there, black bit there, grey bit there, black here, white there, you know, sort of pretty much. You can see there's a bit of variation. And that's a 7 by 7 variation. Again, you've got, you know, slight variation, a bit of black there, a bit of sort of brown there, this sort of thing. There's a bit of colour variation in it. But that's what you get from NASA. Totally black and white. No grey bits, no features, no colours. Nothing. Nothing. And all those LRO images do appear to be completely black and white.
The main module wouldn't be there, would it? Would have gone back up to the orbiter.
Well, you'd at least see the base. You should be able, I mean, you should be able to, let's go back to this.
The base wouldn't be all that sort of dark, would it? It would be lines of colours.
Potentially it would, yeah. You'd still be able to see the feet, because the feet should still be there. But potentially, as you say, the base itself should be coloured even lighter, so, you know, you should be able to see the variation, you know. But it's still too big. So we have a problem, and I've got another image comparison here. Now, this is not a totally fair comparison, because the LRO image was taken from orbit, but the LEM images were taken close up, you see what I mean? So the LEM image that I used a minute ago, this was taken with an ordinary camera, you know, from the command module, and this one was taken from orbit. So it's not a totally fair comparison, I admit that. But to give you an idea of some type of colour variation, I think it's still a legitimate comparison to make, to give an idea of what we should be seeing. But there's no atmosphere on the moon, remember, so we should have pretty much clear images. What's all these vertical lines here doing? What's all this mush and gunk? Now, there are several other photos you can go onto the NASA website and you can look at these for yourself. There are several other alleged Apollo landing sites. And they label them all up for you to tell you what they are. Now, I think in this one, Surveyor 3, an earlier probe which has landed, that's white there. See, it's a white blob. Oh, look. In this other photograph from NASA, Surveyor 3 is black. Why would that be? Rather odd. Why are these photographs crap? Let's look at, we'll explore this a bit more. I've got a few of these slides here. So, let's see. This is claimed to be the lunar rover parking spot. Did it explode or get burned to a crisp? That is meant to be the lunar rover parking spot. So we went from this to a black smudge. I'm not convinced, Nat. I'm really not convinced that these are what you're telling me. I'm really not convinced at all. I'm sorry. Other people might be. I apologise if you're convinced and you think I'm barking up the wrong tree, but I'm just not convinced anymore. Now, I watched as Rob was saying in the introduction, I was 4 years old when Neil Armstrong supposedly walked on the moon. And they asked me when I was a kid, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I said an astronaut. Okay, so that's what effect it had on me.
Now, in the earlier version of this presentation, I showed some images from Google Earth, Google Maps, which actually I didn't realize were aerial photographs, and so this wasn't a fair comparison. However, what I've done here is I've shown this image from GeoEye, which is a meter resolution image. And GeoEye is 423 miles above the Earth. It's travelling at 4 miles per second, that's 17,000 miles an hour. LRO's close orbit, when it took the pictures of the Apollo relics, was only 50 miles above surface, and there was no atmosphere. So you can see in this picture here, we've got quite a bit of detail. We've got different variations of colour. Even this car here we can see 3 variations, possibly even arguably 4, some coloration at the front, some coloration on the roof, and at the back, because this is 1 meter per pixel. If we were to compare this with the images from LRO here, we don't see this same level of detail, and we've got all these vertical lines. So what's going on? And here again we see this lunar rover's turned to a black smudge, and all this black around the lunar module. I really don't know what this is supposed to show. So really, why are these images so awful? And as a footnote, why? Well, if this was an image I had taken and claimed that I'd flown in a helicopter and taken a picture of a UFO on the ground, to change the subject and the context somewhat, do you think that people would believe me if I showed them this image as being of a real flying saucer? I somehow don't think so.
I don't want to ask a rhetorical question, but you get the hopefully you get the point I'm trying to make. Okay, so that's what I mean about photographic. I measured stuff. It's, you know, I repeated stuff, like the guy with the tennis court. He measured stuff. He performed an experiment. This is what you can do. Easily disprove NASA's story. But nobody wants to accept it because nobody wants to think that they've been lied to so much. But it goes on. We're not even at the blooming interval yet. Okay, this was, when I saw this clip, I have to confess, I was extremely upset when I saw this clip, because this was probably the one that convinced me they didn't go. And you know, you've heard the expression, don't let the bottom fall out of your world, have a Madras curry and let the world fall out of your bottom. You know, if I could be a bit crude, but the bottom fell out of my world.
Of all the footage of Apollo 11 requested from NASA over a 5-year period, one gem was discovered just before the completion of this documentary. An old reel received by mistake. It contains the raw or unedited footage of the crew of Apollo 11, Michael Collins, Edwin Aldrin Jr. and Neil Armstrong, staging part of their mission for nearly an hour in living color, with exceptionally clear behind-the-scenes audio of conversations discussing the techniques used to achieve a disingenuous picture depicting the Earth at a distance in order to falsely demonstrate their far journey from it and their ability to survive passing through the Van Allen radiation belts. It cannot be misconstrued that this staging was done for some other reason prior to the mission, for the reel itself is slated and dated July 18th, 19th and 20th, 1969, the very days of the mission when they were said to be approaching and achieving lunar orbit. Furthermore, it is apparent they are in genuine zero gravity aboard the actual spacecraft, necessary to convince the mass media of their authenticity, just not any further than Earth orbit, as you will see. In this never-before-seen or heard footage, not only is the radio conversation between the astronauts and Houston Control audible, there is a secondary, private conversation taking place between the crew and a third confidential party, prompting the astronauts with what to say, when to speak, and how to effectively manipulate the camera to achieve the desired misleading effect. NASA claims that the Houston transmissions were the only ones taking place with the astronauts. Listen now as Houston Control initiates a conversation with the crew, only to find them too preoccupied with the behind-the-scenes trickery to respond. Moments pass and the oversight is picked up on by the clandestine third party, who quickly prompts them with talk. Immediately, Neil Armstrong speaks.
Hello, Apollo 11. Houston, Goldstone says that the TV looks great. Over. Sure. Huh? Okay, Roger, we're mapping in on Earth.
Again, the illusion they are attempting to create is the Earth at a distance to demonstrate their far journey from it and their ability to survive passing through the Van Allen radiation belts. Understand, too, that only about 20 seconds of this raw footage was ever broadcast to the public, and these conversations discussing their deception were believed to be private, until now. Here they discuss that these television transmissions were in fact not broadcast live as everyone believed. They were first screened and edited for playback later.
Roger, Neil, we just wanted a narrative such that we can, when we get to playback, we can sort of correlate what we're seeing. Thank you very much.
Here they discuss the fact that they have turned out the lights and have blocked out sunlight from entering the spacecraft through the other windows as to not cause any reflected light to fall onto the spacecraft's wall in the foreground.
Okay, very good. Well, we shut out the sun coming in some of the other windows into the spacecraft, so it's looking through the number one window, and there isn't any reflected light.
The reason this was done is so that the truth of the matter would not be revealed. It is this. Though the federal government would have you believe that this is a view of Earth from a distance out of the spacecraft's window as it nears the moon, it is not. What they have ingeniously done is placed the camera at the back of the spacecraft and centered the lens on a circular window in the foreground, outside of which it is completely filled with the Earth in low orbit. The circumference of the window then appears to be the diameter of the Earth at a distance, with the darkened walls of the spacecraft appearing to be the blackness of space around it. That is why they wanted the interior dark and blocked out the sun from entering through the other windows. Here you can see the extruded window, probably 2 inches thick at the bottom. This is because the Earth's shine is coming in at a downward angle. It also causes the Earth to appear to be an irregularly shaped circle, for you are seeing the outside of the window at the bottom and the inside of the window at the top, which together form 2 different sized halves of a circle. Subsequently, this take was never used. As they perfected the shot, a crescent-shaped piece of black material was inset slightly into the window to create the illusion of the Earth's terminator line dividing night and day. It is uncannily convincing. During this segment, intended to be edited and played back later for the worldwide television audience, dated July 18, 1969, Neil Armstrong condemns himself as he states that he is 130,000 miles out, or halfway to the moon, as the NASA flight log also states on this date, when he is in reality in low Earth orbit of a few hundred miles.
Roger, Houston, Apollo 11. Calling in from about 130,000 miles out.
Here, during another segment, also intended to air after review, Neil Armstrong falsely explains to the viewers how the shot is attained by putting the camera's lens to the window's glass, as it would have to be if they were the claimed distance away from the Earth.
We only have one window that has a view of the Earth, and it's filled up with the TV camera.
If the window was completely filled up with a TV camera, as he stated, then an astronaut's arm would not be able to get between the camera and the window, as it obviously does here in this outtake.
South America becomes invisible just off beyond the Terminator or inside the shadow.
You can also notice how the astronaut operating the camera reacted to the mistake by attempting to pan away from it.
Blue gas, see white bands of major cloud formations across the Earth.
This is a segment that they believed wasn't even being recorded, much less suitable for broadcast, for the lens was being zoomed out and the scene was being changed to that of an interior of the astronauts at work, and apparently the stop button popped back up on the recorder without notice. Here is the diffused work light that they used to see camera controls, but not throw light onto the spacecraft's wall. Here they remove part of the crescent insert. Finally, the iris is opened up and you can see the real location of the camera and the very bright and near Earth out the window. Here is the slate for the 19th of July, and the same shot of trickery on the 19th of July, and then the 20th, and the same misleading shot on the 20th. Later that evening, they were said to be walking on the moon. How can this be when they were in Earth orbit only 9 hours earlier, and the moon is some 3 days' journey away? All 3 Apollo 11 astronauts also resigned shortly after their return. On the 25th anniversary of the event in 1994, Neil Armstrong made a rare public appearance and held back tears as he spoke these brief cryptic remarks before the next generation of taxpayers as they toured the White House.
Today we have with us a group of students among America's best. To you we say, we have only completed a beginning. We leave you much that is undone. There are great ideas undiscovered, breakthroughs available to those who can remove one of truth's protective layers.
He is that layer. Perhaps someday soon, with the uncovering of this footage and its meaning, the true patriots of America will rise up or come forward and free the citizens and themselves from the sin that so easily entangles and from a federal government that needs to have the gangrene cut off.
Okay, I'll cut that clip there. But seeing that clip of them faking a shot of the Earth, what possible reason would they have to do that if they really were? All they needed to do was stick the camera out the window. Okay, there's a lot more video. I've got a couple of DVDs here where I can, we'll do that. I'll just do this slide. I've got a couple of DVDs here with that full documentary that's from. It's called A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Moon. Some of it's a bit overbearing, but that is the key segment, which is the sort of main bit of the film. There's also Jim Collier's Was It Only a Paper Moon? We've got The Astronauts Gone Wild as well. That's got some other bits and pieces in. But I think we're going to have a break there because it's 9:05 now, and then we're going to look at some of the physical hardware problems with the Apollo craft. Thank you. Hope you get some rescue remedy down you. Yeah. Right, so we'll carry on. I'm going to sort of dive into this again. I was highlighted some problems with the hardware of Apollo, some basic stuff again. So let's move on to this. Now, a lot of people ask this question. This is one of the common questions that come up, and I was asked it during the interval by somebody. I'm not going to spend too much time on the radiation because the problem is this. It's not something we can easily observe for ourselves. We have to take the expert's word for this. Now, you've perhaps heard about these theoretical things called the Van Allen zones, which surround the Earth, and it was mentioned in the video clip. And people say that they couldn't have travelled through the Van Allen zones, because Van Allen discovered these belts of radiation around the Earth, I think in the 1940s or 50s. I don't know exactly when they were discovered. But let's see. However, Van Allen, who discovered them, then stated that they must not have been as lethal as he thought, because the Apollo astronauts had travelled to the moon and back. I.e., it became a circular argument. Okay? So as soon as they claimed to have gone there, he went back on his original statement about the dangers to human life of the radiation there. But again, you've just got to... I was looking... We've had I'll just take a little detour here, because obviously there's some huge scares about the radiation coming from the nuclear power stations that have been heavily damaged in Japan. And we've had Alex Jones selling potassium iodide on the InfoWars site with these big headlines about how everyone's going to get radiation poisoning. And yet, if you go onto an independent website called radiationnetwork.com, you can see people have got their Geiger counters that they bought from wherever, got a serial port on them or an Ethernet port, whatever, they plug them into their router or to their computer, and they upload the radiation reading onto the website with the result of getting an independent radiation map of the whole of the USA. All counts are normal, but why I brought this up is that there is an elevated count in Colorado. The count in Colorado is about twice as high as everywhere else. Why is it higher in Colorado? Well, it's a mountainous region, so you get more radiation coming through because you've got less atmosphere protecting you. On the moon, you have no atmosphere protecting you. So all the cosmic ray radiation, which you're normally protected from by the ozone layer, will hit you when you're on the moon. Okay? And they were there for quite a number of hours. So just bear that in mind. And it's not just the astronauts, but the cameras too, remember? Cameras have got film in them, which is sensitive to radiation. Now, so that's one problem you can just think about. Again, I'm not going to go into the details. Jim Collier has also noted that the lunar excursion module in there, the space is too small to climb in and out of when you've got a spacesuit on without knocking some of the equipment. He went and measured the mock-up, or the unused one I should say, which is at the Smithsonian Institution, and he found that it was going to be a very tight squeeze for the astronauts to get in and out of that door without knocking or potentially damaging some critical control in there. Okay? Now, another simple experiment you can do, which you don't even have to do it because you've already done it. You go to the supermarket on a hot summer's day, it's 25, 26, 30 degrees. You close up your car so that nobody nicks stuff. You go in the supermarket for half an hour, you come out, what do? You open the doors, right? You've maybe let the heat out for a minute or something while you're packing your shopping or something like that. Why do you do that? Because it's blooming hot in there. So if you've got a lunar excursion module on the moon for 12 hours, how the hell are you going to cool it? Can't wind the windows down. What did they use? Batteries? How much battery power would they need?
More than this.
Yeah, more than the microphone. Yeah. So how are the spacesuits cooled in such heat? Again, you can look at this, and they claim that there's various fluids circulating around the arms and the legs and stuff like this. I mean, I haven't gone into the detail. I'm just posing the question. To me, I don't think they could have done it. I don't think they could have cooled the lunar module sufficiently for the amount of time that they claim to be on the moon. But now we're going to go on to some definite figures. This is what somebody sent me a couple of years ago, and I managed to just pull this out and put it into this presentation. More rover hardware problems. This is NASA's own documentation. I was advised that the operating spec of the lunar rover, the survival upper limit for the battery is at 140 Fahrenheit, which is 60 degrees centigrade. Okay? This meant that the lunar rover could not have worked for very long at all because, if you go on to somewhere like Wikipedia, in fact I didn't want to use Wikipedia because it's a controlled site. In the day, the temperature of the moon averages 107 centigrade. 107, that's hotter than the boiling point of water, of course. So, how could the batteries on this thing have worked when it's 40 degrees hotter than their maximum operating temperature, according to NASA's own information? It couldn't have worked. Yet they were happily driving around, having a lovely time. Wave to Mum. It was just a show. It was a show. Yes. Now, again, a lot of people don't talk about what the astronauts themselves have actually said. Remember, these are the guys that are supposed to have been to the moon. Let's have a listen to what they've said. Now, Buzz Aldrin, he was confronted by this Bart Sibrel, and we've got this famous clip, people have probably seen this, of Buzz Aldrin punching him in the face, literally. So at the start of Astronauts Gone Wild, Aldrin punched Sibrel in the face. I mean, Sibrel now regrets this incident, and I kind of, I don't blame Aldrin in one sense, because Sibrel was really bugging him, and, he was just getting in his face and stuff like this. But this clip is a bit less confrontational, but it's quite interesting to listen to.
I mean, do you have Neil Armstrong interviewed already?
No, he doesn't want to be interviewed.
Well, I know. Why does he not give any views?
Well, because that's his personal choice. And I guess it's mine, in a way, to do things when they've been researched and worked out as far as a business arrangement. This is not news. This is not an anniversary.
Well, actually it is. We found a very unique reel of footage that we have queued up to show you.
Yeah.
And it's from the mission. And to our knowledge, no one has ever seen it before.
Mm.
And it's 30 years old.
And you want me to see this while you have me on camera?
Well, and to tell us what it is. I mean, it's...
Well, I don't know why I should do that.
It's a very unique
well,
footage.
It may be that I need to see it, and then we sit down and we talk about what you're taking a picture of. I don't see where there's an advantage in it for me to do what you're asking me to do. I see all sorts of pitfalls. What is your proposition? That we didn't go to the moon?
I know for a fact that you did.
Huh?
I know for a fact that you did not.
You know for a fact that we did not.
That's correct. If you'll see, this tape proves that.
Okay, well, I'm not interested in satisfying your suppositions when there's all this evidence that we did.
This proves, as you see, that you were using the window to demonstrate that you were halfway to the moon when you were
Turn the camera off, please. Turn the camera off. You're full of shit.
It shows that you're in Earth orbit. Now, if the moon is 3 days away, and this is late, on the 18th, how could you possibly walk on the moon 2 days later when this was shot on the 18th?
You want me to sit in front of a camera while you're taking pictures, you're showing this, and then you want to see my reaction?
I know for a fact that
that's slimy journalism. Do you realize that?
If
you ought to be ashamed of
yourself. If you read the
yourself.
document that I have in here, you'll find that it's not. But this is a personal plea to do what is right.
Well, we sit and we talk about things ahead of
There's other
time.
documents that you'll want to see. I know for a fact.
But what it is you're trying to do is unethical. You don't believe that?
No, I do not.
Well, then we have a difference of opinion. Well, you're talking to the wrong guy. Why don't you talk to the administrator in NASA? We're passengers. We're guys going on a flight. We're not.
I know for a fact that it didn't happen. And this tape would prove it in a court of law. It would.
Why don't you try? Why don't you put your money into a court of law and see how people laugh at you? You want it.
No one has
Is your
laughed.
camera working?
No one has laughed.
And this makes you the real famous person that has discovered this and reveals all this stuff. What an ego you must have to want to propel yourself like this.
That's not why I'm doing it, and God knows that's not why I'm doing it. I'm doing it for the truth to come out because I think it was wrong.
You can also notice how the
Well, but you're doing it the wrong way. You don't mislead somebody like me to come in here.
If you didn't go to the moon, that's misleading people. I'm showing you this
Okay,
tape.
we went to the moon. We're not misleading anybody.
Then how is it possible that this is the window? It's shot to make it look like.
Look, you can manufacture all you want with
This
these
is
things.
straight. This isn't manufactured.
Sure.
You know that it isn't. I believe this would prove it in a court of law that you did not go to the moon. It's dated on the 18th. It proves when you remove the
You give me your
here's
business
the light.
card.
It's all in there. It's all in there.
Here they remove part of the crescent insert.
This proves that it's the window. You can see them removing the crescent insert that you did to create the Terminator line in front
You're
of the
so
window.
full of shit, I can't believe it. If you show this publicly, you're open for a lawsuit. Okay?
Habitation on the moon. We can visit other people with their habitation. We can keep track. If there's something very important to be developed from the moon, I'm not sure what it is right now. And I sure think we should identify what it is for America to make such gross expenditures again for human habitation on the moon. We can help. We can join with. Together, we can explore the moon and develop the moon. We should go boldly where man has not gone before. fly by the comets, visit asteroids, visit the moon of Mars. There's a monolith there, a very unusual structure on this little potato-shaped object that goes around Mars once in 7 hours. When people find out about that, they're going to say, who put that there? Who put that there? Well, the universe put it there. If you choose, God put it there. Maybe.
Buzz Aldrin's violent reaction is not surprising, considering the hundreds of thousands of dollars he has made by defrauding people, selling his personal memorabilia. According to the winter 2008 issue of Heritage magazine, in September of 2007, Aldrin sold the following items which he claimed were flown to the moon. A medallion for $15,535, a silver dollar for $31,070, a chart for $71,700, and a handwritten note for $179,250.
Well, that clip goes on a bit. You get the idea of it. Aldrin he's not really facing up to it. I think the interesting quote I wanted to show you there was that he said, we're just passengers, we're guys going on a flight. He didn't say to the moon. He said he should talk to the administrator of NASA, kind of pass the blame across. We've covered the Armstrong one. I think I've covered that twice, but there is more in this clip.
It is estimated that in just the first 60 minutes on the moon, motivated by the tenuous nature of the circumstances, many more exposures could have been expediently taken. Also surprising is the scarcity of photographs of the mission's chief pioneer, Neil Armstrong, the greatest achievement in human history, and of the man whose first step echoed around the world, dawning a new age of scientific enlightenment. There is only one full-body picture of him on the moon, besides this ghostly reflection. This one, taken by an automatic camera mounted on the side of the lunar module. Perhaps he feared liability should the whole conundrum later become unraveled. Perhaps he has forgotten that he attested to the authenticity of the event with his signature on this plaque engraved by the federal government. And what about stars? On the moon, with no atmosphere, they must have been quite a sight to behold. Yet there is seldom any mention of them, if ever, by any of the astronauts on any of the missions. Undoubtedly, creating a mural with all the constellations properly placed in the sky would have been virtually impossible to create accurately, much less realistically. A competent amateur astronomer would have been able to call attention to the slightest error in measurement. The answer? Not to talk about the stars. Ever. In their post-flight press conference, it was the only question to which Neil Armstrong responded with an absence of memory.
When you looked up at the sky, could you actually see the stars and the solar corona in spite of the glare?
We were never able to see stars from the lunar surface or on the daylight side of the moon by eye without looking through the optics. I don't recall during the period of time that we were photographing the solar corona what stars we could see.
I don't remember seeing any.
Years later, though, Michael Collins would remember seeing the elusive stars and wrote about them in Expeditions to the Moon. It seems his memory improved the older he got. Why don't stars appear in any of the photographs? Simply because the proper, mostly closed exposure setting for the camera's iris, set that way to compensate for the bright sunlight on the moon's surface, completely diminished the faintness of relatively distant specks of diminutive light. This answer is true. It does not, however, explain why they never took any pictures of the stars by themselves, with an exposure setting perfect for them. While they took 3 automobiles to the moon, they never took a photographic telescope. Had they done so, they would have been able to see farther into the universe than had ever before been realized.
Mr. Armstrong, I do realize that when you were on the moon, you had very little time for gazing upwards. But could you tell us something about what the sky actually looks like from the moon? The sun, the earth, the stars, if any, and so on?
The sky is a deep black when viewed from the moon, as it is when viewed from cislunar space, the space between the Earth and the moon. The Earth is the only visible object other than the sun that can be seen, although there have been some reports of seeing planets. I myself did not see planets from the surface, but I suspect they might be visible. The Earth is quite beautiful from space and from the moon. It looks quite small and quite remote, but it's very blue and covered with white lace and of the clouds, and the continents are clearly seen, although they have very little color from that distance.
What about the sun? Did you see any trace of the corona?
No, the glare from the sun on the helmet visor was too difficult to pick out the corona. The only time we could see the corona was during an eclipse of the sun from the moon. That is, when we were flying through the moon's shadow and could observe the solar corona peeking out from behind the moon. Today we have with us a group of students among America's best. To you we say, we have only completed a beginning. We leave you much that is undone. There are great ideas undiscovered, breakthroughs available to those who can remove one of truth's protective layers.
Mr. Armstrong, Bart Sibrel, ABC Digital. Wanted to give you the opportunity to swear on the Bible that you walked on the moon. Will you put your left hand on the Bible and swear to God that you walked on the moon?
Gentlemen.
Mr. Sibrel.
Yes? If you really walked on the moon, why would you not do that? So why don't you just put the end to the record in the argument and put your hand on the Bible, swear to God you walked on the moon.
Mr. Sibrel, knowing you, that's probably a fake Bible.
Really? Well, no, it's a real Bible. You have the opportunity to have $5,000.
The meeting is not open.
Well, you have $5,000 cash. You can give it to charity if you swear on the Bible that you walked on the moon.
Please
I have
give
the
it to
tape.
charity. It'd be fine.
Why don't you swear to... Why not? Why won't you do it? So why don't you put your hand on the Bible and swear to God that you walked on the moon?
Mr. Sibrel has made a fool of himself in front of the world. Mr. Sibrel, you do not deserve answers.
The pictures that came back were quite remarkable. What did it look like to you, to your naked eye?
It's a brilliant surface in that sunlight. The horizon seems quite close to you because the curvature is so much more pronounced than here on Earth. It's an interesting place to be. I recommend it.
You said once to a reporter, how long must it take before I cease to be known as a spaceman? Why did you make that comment?
I guess we all like to be recognized not for one piece of fireworks, but for the ledger of our daily work.
After Apollo 11, Armstrong hung up his spacesuit and never felt the need for an encore. For 8 years, he taught engineering at the University of Cincinnati, surely their only professor who'd walked on the moon. Did you ever imagine that 5 years after first going to the moon that we'd abandon the Apollo program?
I knew we would have a limited life, but I must say it was a bit shorter than my expectation. I fully expected that by the end of the century, we would have achieved substantially more than we actually did.
Again, when you see that whole TV special on Armstrong from 2005, you might not really think about it much, but when you pick out certain statements like that, very peculiar,